journalism under surveillance. Now, I want to start with the regulator. There are bills that are going through and laws that have come through, the Cyber Protection Act, one of them, which has actually left the media industry thinking and fearing that some of these bills or laws are going to be used to put journalists under surveillance, to watch who we talk to, how we get our own information, and eventually make sure that we are not as effective as journalists in a democratic Zimbabwe as we should be. Now, how do you see these views, these fears from the government perspective?
So thank you very much for that question. I think it gives me an opportunity to explain things. I think when we say journalism under surveillance, it is not just the state, it is also surveillance from the publics. The trust that is between journalism and the public, whether it is still there, and if it is being eroded, what is eroding it, all that. And also you must know that there is the corporate world, which has so much power to control what goes on out there. So for us, when we think of regulation, we're not regulating to restrict, we are regulating to protect. So we know, for example, that the powers that are in the corporate sector, earlier on, I think the chairperson in the video talked about being bullied. And we know that the world over, the space for journalism is shrinking because it is, encountering forces from the media. I mean, from the state, from bullies who are on the other end, including the forces of commercialization. So for us, the regulation is to make sure that both the practice and the readership gets protected.
Amazing. Now, Kolwani, as you sit in your cubicle every other day producing the standard for Zimbabwe, do you feel a sense that your journalists yourselves are watched, or do you feel a sense of real freedom in what you are doing as we look at journalists under surveillance?
Thank you, Blessed. I think as the media industry evolves, and also as we move into different platforms, the threats to our profession also increase. When you talk about digital surveillance, you're talking about, it's not just the state, like Mr. Kanare said. Even your readers, remember, what we're doing, we are publishing and broadcasting stories that certain people don't want the stories to come out. So there will be all sorts of things that will be done to stop us from publishing. You will see online journalists being intimidated at times by people that you can't even really trace, because they are ghost accounts. They use accounts that you can't really tell who's threatening you. We've seen people, maybe at times, some journalists even abandoning social media. But social media is part of the tools that we use to gather our information. I think this is it's a growing threat to the independence of journalists. There are laws that are coming that have come up, the Cyber Security Act. But we haven't seen it being used to protect journalists. I think it's interesting because there's a live example that I can give of journalists that of threats. I think a week ago we published an investigative story about some miners that were accused of abusing their workers. We did everything that we should have done in coming up with the story. We thought it was balanced. We gave everyone a voice. Instead of reacting to our story, we saw a certain foreign embassy. The attacks started offline through one of our mainstream publications. and were accused of seeking to work with the opposition to demonize investors from a certain country, and were said to be behind demonstrations that are supposed to happen this week. That was instead of responding to our story with facts. There were all sorts of accusations that were made against us. And those threats, they moved offline to online because there were a series of tweets that from that embassy which were actually trying to create an impression that perhaps we are out to sabotage the country, and that's a serious threat. If anyone reads online, there are people out there that could be overzealous and they could attack you because you are being accused of sabotaging the economy. People are suffering. And those are kind of threats that journalists face every day. And it gets worrying when it's actually coming from another state. There are also, this day, especially towards elections, there are lots of ghost accounts that come up, and this is being used widely. I remember there were cases where, was it 2 years ago, where Facebook announced that they took thousands of accounts, they took them off because they were used during elections to intimidate and also to spread false information. So those are the kind, it's very difficult for journalists to feel safe online in line with those.
Amazing, and some would say journalists would be sabotaging the country, in a country that they actually live in an economy that they also live in and also want to have better lives. Why would you sabotage an economy that affects you? That's a question that people have to ask themselves. But I'll come to Tawana Majoni with the IDT. You do a lot of corruption reporting, investigations, and you have been in the trenches for a very, very long time. The amazing thing, Majoni has also been a police officer, and so he has been in both worlds. But Majoni, to what extent should journalists be afraid of being under surveillance in present-day Zimbabwe?
Well, in direct response to your question, they should never be afraid to do their work as journalists. So it's not about the extent or the level to which journalists are supposed to be afraid or not afraid. Because the recognition and the realization is that journalism, besides being a profession, is a station. A social station whereby people have elected to come out there, dig up information, share it into the public domain, and then at the end of the day, you have an empowered society. We have an empowered globe because of the work that journalists do. That's why they call the fourth estate, because of primarily that particular role that they play. So they should never be afraid of anything when they're doing their work.
But what is the reality of the threat for journalists?
All right, so maybe that's the question. In Zimbabwe, unfortunately, especially for the independent media, there is a real big threat. It's a good thing that we have a representative from the ministry here. Kolwani, when he started talking, he did reference some reportage that took place here last week. But what he didn't say, I think out of tact, was the fact that this reportage is coming from the official media. An official media of which we assume at the practical level is controlled, even though undesirably by the Ministry of Information, which is a government representative. What this report did, I think there were two stories that came out. What this report did was it condemned journalists as working in cahoots with the political opposition in Zimbabwe to foment what one of the journalists said, to foment chaos ahead of planned protests. Now, that was a lie. But for me, what is particularly disturbing and unsettling about it is it then creates an excuse for state security agents to start surveilling journalists. Right now, as we're talking, we don't know, because most of the times surveillance happens at a subtle undercover level. We don't know whether Kolwani is being surveilled, We don't know whether Majoni is being served because my organization was implicated in that particular story. But then what you cannot quarrel against is the fact that it's created, is generated a feeling towards surveillance, an attitude towards surveillance, especially by state security. I know that there's an acknowledgement that surveillance happens beyond state surveillance, but also non-state surveillance. But I'm particularly worried now about state surveillance because state surveillance is ominous. Sometimes you think that it's actually sinister. There's that threat that the journalists would feel. People like myself. I mean, when I come here and I do talk, fine, I would talk with confidence, I would talk with but at the end of the day, I say to myself, am I really safe because of the reportage that's come out in the media? So the media create deliberate and whereby some people are going to justify what? Surveillance.
Amazing. Now, as we just wrap this up, I want to give from our regulator, our ministry, government is supposed to do for people what people can't do for them. And some have said that government is also supposed to protect everyone, regardless of their political affiliation. Now, if you are seen as a player, the perception I'm talking about, as a player in surveilling a journalist, in wanting to throttle voices of dissent, how do you as a government encourage development in a nation?
Sorry, I didn't get the real question here, but let me say that there is a difference between opinion and fact. Some of the descriptions that I've heard here are opinions of some other people about an article that was published. Those will always be there. The issue of whether journalists are under threat or not, those have to be proved. I'm not saying they are not under threat or they are under threat. As we know, journalism has to be tenacious. Regardless of whether you are saying it's the state or whoever, you know that if you are going to break a story about someone who has done something that causes climate change, for example, and they were getting money out of that, they'll feel you are taking bread out of their mouth and therefore they will attack you. So the attack for journalism is from different angles. And as a government, as a ministry, our desire is to minimize those. Where they are, they have to be proved. If journalists need our help, we are always there to help. You remember that during COVID in 2021 and part of this year, we declared journalists as an essential service, cadre. And whenever they were, arrested or harassed, and we were called, we were there for the journalists. Because we believe the work that they do is genuine. We believe that what they do will help this country go forward. If there are still tensions, in my view, they are still residual. I think if you are in the past, it takes time to move. But what we are saying is, come across, let's work together. Let's destroy the things that divide us. Let's try and build a country where the access to information is possible for everybody. This is the result. This can only be a result of us working together. And I must say, we have been engaging very well with the private media. I must say, we have worked much better than we did before. We are no longer quarreling over small things these days.
Amazing. Now, perception versus reality. Are you reassured from the statements from the regulator, Koloni?
Well, not the regulator, Minister. I think it's true. There have been positive developments in the past 5 years. Well, it can't happen overnight. We can't change overnight. But I think Mr. Kandari being here is testimony of that we're moving forward. Okay.
Amazing. Now, I'll ask you, Majoni, in your closing remarks, what is it that we can do, the media, government, and our publics, to ensure that we trust each other, and this aspect of surveillance and this aspect of Big Brother is watching, is dissolved in the waters of trust?
I like the fact that you use the word trust, because trust is something that is very much missing in this whole matrix. At the end of the day, you build trust by a continuous and continual engagement with each other. You are honest with each other. You explain to each other what your mandate and intentions are. Because this mistrust that happens, that therefore gives some people the opportunity to start doing surveillance, is coming from the fact that we misunderstand each other. But when we engage more, we engage in a bona fide, progressive, and well-intentioned manner, then we can move forward. I think the best thing to then do it, is to try and organize regular get-together engagements between the ministry, the private media, as well, and this is very important, as well as the public media. Because we don't quarrel against the reality that there's polarization within the media. The independent media, so-called media independent, is on one side, and the public media is on the other side. The public media is mostly playing at the behest of those that are in power. And the private media thinks that those that are in power are out to get them. But if you engage honestly, then we'll see an end to this mistrust. And then the surveillance we're talking about will be a thing of the past. Thank you on that note.
Amazing. No, thank you very much to my wonderful panel this morning for the insights that they have just shared. So some have been arguing that the media is constantly surveilling us. They're constantly telling our stories. So we should return the favor and also, look at what they are doing. But the media is a tool for development. The media is not an enemy. The media is the difference. Where there is a drought, it prevents a famine. The media is what makes a difference on your investment choices, because they tell you what is happening in the market. Without that form of communication, we as a nation are poorer. Without free, frank discussions, we as a nation are poorer. And the standard on 25 years stands solidly on that ground of making Zimbabwe a better place for all of us, for future generations to come. And I salute the men that took that first stand 25 years ago to create a read that we all are in this room for. We all buy every single Sunday. I actually buy it when I'm not at work. That's the test of how good our product is. If I don't get it for free, I will buy it. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Situation right now with me, Blessed Mhlanga Dara on Heart and Soul TV and radio. Enjoy the rest of your morning.